and welcome to the Week 14 edition of the Lines Megapod. It is Matt Brown. It is Steven Andress. It is Adam Candee. We're going to go through each and every game, give you the bets in our accounts, give you the leans that we have, and if we hate a game, we'll let you know about that too. Yes, there is NFL going on this week. I know you only want to know where Shohei Ohtani is going to play baseball, but guess what? We're going to go ahead and talk the NFL here in Week 14 anyway, and let's go ahead and get things going. Guys, I mean, not a ton to take from Thursday night. I think the big takeaway here is we have been jumping up and down saying that the Steelers were not a very good football team, and it was eventually going to come back and haunt them, and it finally has here in the last few weeks. I don't think this was really shocking to anybody out there, so we will continue on. They lost a game with Mr. Trubisky at quarterback. They're just not very good. So we'll kind of talk about that maybe as we head into next week, whether we want to start to fade them in some other fashion or something like that. All right. Carolina Panthers and the New Orleans Saints. This is 5.5 in favor of the Saints at home. 37.5 to 38 is your total. Everything is pointing towards Jameis Winston for the Saints. Carolina Panthers do not look like they can win a football game in the NFL. And that's a good thing for the Chicago Bears in the driver's seat for the number 1 overall pick. Adam, I'll start with you here. If the Panthers couldn't pull it out the last couple of weeks, I just don't know if they're going to be able to pull it out. Now, I understand they don't have to win outright. They just got to keep it within 5.5 points. But you look and, man, it was like weaker opponents than the Saints, and these teams were handing it to them. They were just like, here, please take it. Please win this game. The Bucs, here, take this. Here, Titans said, here, win. They wouldn't do it. And here come now they're going on the road to the Saints. And yeah, I get it. It's Jameis, but Jameis actually introduces a little bit of variance into this game, which I think sure could play against them, but also go play for them to where like the Saints like win this at margin.
I'm going to give you my counterpoint here, and it's a lean, not a play. But you know how on Inside the NBA, at the beginning of every season, they like to play who he play for with Charles Barkley? Yes. And they asked Charles Barkley, hey, they give him a random player at the end of a bench, who he play for, and Charles almost never gets any of them right. This week with the New Orleans Saints, we're going to play who he throw to, because there is no one left for the New Orleans Saints to catch passes unless they get some very positive injury news on Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, because they're already without Michael Thomas, and I'm not quite sure who there's going to be for Jameis Winston to be able to throw those touchdowns and or interceptions in the direction of. Now, on the other side of this, Carolina continues to get healthier on the defensive side of the ball, and that's really where you have to look at if you believe in Carolina at all this week. I kind of wish I had gotten the 6 or 6.5 when it was still on the board. I actually would kind of like that with Carolina based on what's left for the New Orleans Saints coming into this game, because even in those games where the Carolina Panthers weren't, as you said, able to take games that were being given to them, they have been able to keep some of those games somewhat close against lesser opponents. And I do think it's possible that this plays as a field goal game. So I think it's possible for a lot of different things to happen in this game. However, if you made me play it, and I'm not playing it, I would probably play Carolina plus the points, just because of the fact that when you look at New Orleans, the variance you have on offense, as you mentioned, but also defensively, advanced metrics, past month, they've been 31st in the league with only Washington below them. To the past, they have been 31st in the league with only Detroit below them. And Carolina has actually graded out better as a football team over the last month than the New Orleans Saints have. And in that case, I'm looking at it, I'm getting points with Carolina. Where is Jameis Winston significantly better than Bryce Young? Depends on the week. Depends on what you get out of Jameis. So no play, lean Carolina on the points.
Yeah, very good. Going to be a big injury report. Unfortunately, not out right now for the Saints as we record this. Olave did miss practice on Thursday, but it was with an illness, not from the concussion stuff. So we'll see if he's able to get back out there. It's weird to say this, but honestly, guys, for the Saints team, and Steven, you guys know I've clowned on this for the last several years here on this podcast, but Taysom Hill maybe being out is actually a thing for the Saints. Like, he is weirdly effective for the way that they use him, and he DNP'd the last 2 practices. We need to see what happens on Friday and see what his official status is. But Again, nothing's in my account quite yet. Injury report on the Saints, very big in this one, in my personal opinion. Olave would have to be going. I think Taysom Hill would at least need a chance to go for me to even consider the Saints. What say you, Steven?
I'm glad you brought up Taysom Hill, because if you didn't, I was going to. Because if for those that were following this team for most of the year, they were so bad in the red zone, like putridly bad. I don't even know if that's a word, but that's how bad it was.
It is now.
I'm making up words. That's how
it
bad
is
the
now.
red zone offense was.
I love it.
So on the season, they're like well below 50% on their red zone touchdown rate, but over the past few weeks, they're at near 55%. That was Taysom Hill. They're bringing him in for the most part. He was unstoppable near the goal line because he's just such a, big hunky BYU of a man. And if they don't have him, their red zone issues are an issue. And now you have Jameis Winston, like the play-by-play guy last week, Joe Davis, like screamed at the top of his lungs on that tip pass that should have been picked, turned into a touchdown. The Jameis Winston experience. Like, that is exactly what Winston is. You could get the high of highs because he's just, his ceiling's higher than Derek Carr's, but his floor is
higher
so
than
much
David's
lower.
too.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I have David on the mind after his ludicrous comments this week about
Yes,
Jalen Hurts
yes.
and Marcus Mariota. But yeah, it's just there's so much variance in this game, and I almost care more about Taysom Hill than I do Rashid Shaheed. So I would need more Panthers money to come in here for me to consider New Orleans, and if we get that, then I'll reassess it. But at this number, and with how bad the Panthers have been, I can't do it. This is still a Saints team based on closing numbers was 10.5 at home against Bajent and the Bears. If you flipped home field against the Vikings, it was implying that they were, 6.5 against Minnesota a few weeks ago in the Superdome. So this is it's just right in the middle of me not wanting to do anything.
Yeah, Adam, I agree. Like 6.5 would be Panthers. Under the 6, it's just kind of a whatever, sit back and watch situation.
Yeah,
for me.
and you know what? Sorry, Matt. If you want that 6.5, wait for this injury report to come out and see which way it goes, because I don't think you're going to see a whole lot more move down. I don't think anyone's running to the window to take a dead 5.5 with the Panthers, right? But if you do get some positive news on the Saints, depending on which positive news it is and how you feel about it, it probably goes back the other way.
Los Angeles Rams at the Baltimore Ravens. This is 7.5 in favor of the Ravens at home. 40.5 is the total. Pretty much 40, though, across the board. There was some panic yesterday. Lamar Jackson didn't practice. Back at practice on Friday. All is good in the world. Don't worry about anything. So he is going to go here. And Steven, I look at this, and now that I know, because I pump fake just a little bit, because it was like close to getting my account. Then the whole, Lamar might not, Lamar missed practice. It was just kind of weird. It was the first practice he's missed all season, which was weird to me with all of that. So I did not put the Ravens teaser leg in my account. This Rams defense has been weirdly good over the last little bit of the season, which is weird because, and I say weird because they don't have any players, like they don't have any good guys outside of Donald, but they've been fairly efficient. That said, Ravens out of a bye should be able to just kind of run over this team if it came down to it. I don't know if I'm laying the 7.5, but I think a 1.5 down in a teaser leg feels pretty good.
I'm on the other side here, and I want to first start with the weather, because it's the time of year where we need to be aware of that, and all of the weather that we thought was going to be affecting the games in the Midwest at the beginning of the week now is being forecast to affect some of the Northeast games. And just looking at the forecast now for Baltimore for Sunday 1:00 kickoff, locally heavy rainfall possible, sustained winds around 15 miles per hour. It's actually going to be a pretty warm day, unseasonably warm. But if we're getting rain and wind and heavy rain in a game with a low total, that makes taking this many points above a touchdown pretty attractive to me for the LA Rams. I talked about last week, I wasn't quite ready to back the Rams yet because I wanted to see how they did against their respected defense with Kyren Williams back. And they passed with flying colors to me. And if you look at the splits of the Rams offense when Kyren Williams is on the field this year, Matthew Stafford is being ranked in the advanced metrics right around where Lamar Jackson is so far this year. The Ravens offense, for the most part this season, has a profile more like the Baltimore offenses we've seen in recent years, where they're very run heavy. They are very mediocre in the pass game in terms of success rate and EPA, but they're doing extremely well in the run game. So this is not the spread them out, throw the ball over the field offense that we expected. Now Mark Andrews is out for the foreseeable future. Odell Beckham's banged up every other week. It's going to be the same thing. So I just think this is going to be a slog in the rain, and I'm just not interested in backing a team with this big of a spread, who's trying to maybe recreate their offense at this point, having lost their top target.
Yeah, but I don't know. I guess my counterpoint to that would be is if we're not passing it because of the weather, then doesn't that lean more towards Baltimore, who has the number one rush offense in all the NFL? I mean, just kind of playing the other side of all this. The run defense for the Rams, 20th in EPA allowed. They're 21st according to DVOA. So I mean, we're talking like bottom third as far as run defense for the Rams. If we're talking about the weather forcing the teams to run more, I would probably give the nod to Baltimore. But I mean, certainly the Rams have been running efficiently with Kyren Williams. Adam, what do you see here in this one?
You know, if you go and take a closer look at this, it's going to definitely make me feel better on the Rams side of it than on the Baltimore side of it. And that's largely based on number. And I heard Steven say a minute ago, I'm on the other side of this. I don't know that you're necessarily on the other side of it, because with a total of 40,
right?
If he's going to tease this down, if Matt wants this in a teaser and you want to take more than a touchdown, well, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I do not see a script here where Baltimore is going to blow the Rams off the field, given what we've seen out of the Rams in the past month. The game against Dallas was a terrible game script for the Rams. If you're going to use how have they done against a quality opponent as your guide for what to do with this team, they ended up with defensive touchdowns go against them. They're chasing from behind. They weren't totally healthy. I don't think that game is a good guide. I do think that what the Rams are right now is a team that can probably keep this within a touchdown. I do think that they're going to be able to run the ball a little bit, and I do have concerns about the Ravens offense. I hear everything that Matt's saying, and I think that playing it under a field goal, especially if you're going to take the factors that Steven's putting out there with the weather and say, is this game going to be a sloggy, run-heavy kind of game? Yeah, then I think that both of you are probably in the right place with trying to get this thing inside of a touchdown, right? 1.5 on that teaser or 7.5 on the line.
Yeah, I think what I think what it all comes down to it for me is there is a little bit of noise in the Rams here over the last month, in my personal opinion. If you watch that game against the Browns, it was 20-19. The Browns had the ball going to get up in the game late in the game whenever Flacco threw the interception, and it kind of at that point flipped the way that game went down. I think that was a very misleading score in that game. I don't know. I'm just not as high on the Rams, I think, as a lot of people are here of late, but you're on the other side of a touchdown. You can't really ever go wrong in the NFL saying that you're going to take the other side of a touchdown. It's just a lot of points to cover. Indianapolis Colts and the Cincinnati Bengals. This is 2 at home in favor of Cincinnati. 43.5 to 44 is your total. Adam, this was one of those games where everybody was freaking out about the weather. And, again, guys, this is one thing I will say about weather in general. I'm not saying ignore weather. I am saying start paying attention to weather like Wednesday, Thursday, not Monday, Sunday, Monday, the week before, because weather changes. And if you're putting down money based off of a weather report that is a full week in advance, I'm not going to say you're always on the wrong side of it, because you're definitely not, but you're going to end up being on the wrong side of it more than you would like. And so this number, the total got beat down, and then now it's back up, and everyone was freaking out about what was going on in Cincinnati. Not going to be the case. We see a good game out of Cincinnati last week and kind of took everybody by surprise. Do we see a repeat performance here, or does Indianapolis have just enough to kind of overcome the deficiencies we've seen from Cincinnati on the defensive side of the ball?
I'll start here. I think I'm sorry. Did you toss to Adam? I thought you tossed. I'm sorry. First time I've ever done that in the show, and I apologize. Adam.
It's fine. You weren't paying attention. You were trying to sit there and think about what you wanted to say. Like you were formulating your opinion. Yeah, you were formulating. Yeah, your opinion. Everything I said just like went down, like in one ear, out the. It's fine. Steven, take it. Go ahead, buddy. Go ahead and roll with it. It's fine. Adam gets to go twice in a row though. On this next one. So go.
I can't believe I just did that. I'm sorry, Adam.
It's fine.
Oh God. Great holiday spirit I have. All right. Over 43 here was my bet. I got it before it started moving back up even further. Weather beat it down to 39.5 early in the week. To your point, things changed. 43 was about what the look ahead was, and then where it opened up before the weather started beating it down. So, that was solid for me. And to me, it's about the Cincinnati Bengals. Their defense is horrible. They are 26th by EPA, 27th by DVOA, number 31 by success rate. And they're a dead over team, especially if Jake Brown's going to show what he did last week. On top of that, I think Shane Steichen has done a phenomenal job here over the course of the season, despite having Gardner Minshew. I think it's why he steadily moved up the NFL Coach of the Year rankings, and they have been a dead over team too. 8 of their 12 games have gone for 47 plus points. And one of those was the first Titans game where we talked about last week, where they had miserable red zone luck going 2 for 9. Second meeting, sails over the total, even if you take away the 2 block punts. So he's getting more out of Gardner Minshew than most of us expected. And I think that's because of a 69% expected completion percentage. Steichen is scheming it up where this team can still score points and move the ball, despite Gardner Minshew being at quarterback and his high turnover-worthy play rate. So I think this screams over now that we have an improved forecast. And, that's I'm more comfortable with that than I am either side in this game.
Adam, whenever he took your thing, I needed this on. I needed this like ready to just fire as soon as it was ready to go. The little sad trombone that he stepped on, everything right there. So you heard my setup. So I'll leave you with that. Also, you can answer the question: where is Joe Burrow going to play next year? Because obviously he's getting Wally pipped right here.
I'm sorry. Did you guys need me to talk about something? I thought you had everything covered. So you got last week a 99th percentile performance out of Jake Browning, and everyone has run to the window to say, see, he's not that bad. Well, okay. All right. Do it again. All right. Do it again. I'm not going to be involved in trying to handicap Jake Browning. Is he good? And Gardner Minshew, when does the bad really show up? Because as Steven mentioned, he is not only a turnover-worthy play machine, he is a turnover-worthy play machine at a rate that only Mac Jones and Sam Howell have been able to match thus far this year. You saw what happened with Minnesota and Chicago when someone whose turnover-worthy plays have been skating by finally pop up in the same game, because Josh Dobbs has been in the same spot. He's right below Gardner Minshew in terms of amount of turnover-worthy plays. And when they all came home to roost in one game, the Chicago Bears won a game they had no business winning without an offensive touchdown. So you're asking me to handicap Jake Browning and Gardner Minshew and what's going to happen in an extremely high variance game. It is a pass for me.
I think one thing here, Steven, that does lend towards the over, like you said, is just there are bad defenses at play here, and there are also explosive play guys on both sides of the ball. So it's kind of like Browning doesn't even have to be efficient. We saw this last week with Jamar Chase, where it's like, you don't even have to, although listen, don't make him, Browning was efficient. I'm saying, but he doesn't have to be efficient when you have a dude that can like get behind a defense by 3 yards and then take it 70 yards. I mean, like it's one of those things where there are offensive players on both sides of the ball, Downs and Pittman on the other side of the ball as well, in which you can have like a 58% passing day and this still get over the 43 and a half that is available out there, because my guess would be we have at least one explosive play touchdown that goes like for 40 plus yards in this game. Like that just seems to be the nature of both of these teams.
And as Adam has mentioned in previous shows, when you have quarterbacks like this, turnovers could lend to hitting the over as well. We saw that on Thursday night in a game with a total of 30. A couple of turnovers in the wrong spot of the field made it easier to score, and we sailed over the total by halftime. So I think that's a factor here as well.
All right. This one's going to be tough. Jags and the Browns. This is 3 in favor of the Browns at home. 32.5 is your total. This just came through as we were recording this, that Stefanski is not going to name a starting quarterback for the Browns. And so we get to guess whether it is going to be Joe Flacco or Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He did say that DTR has cleared concussion protocol. So here we go. We at least know that we won't know anything about the Browns. And by the way, we won't know anything about the Jags either, though it is expected that Trevor Lawrence is not going to play for the Jags. He was out there at least trying to hobble around in practice. So there's that going on as well. Adam, it's a guess. Your guess is as good as mine. I think Flacco, it gives the Browns a better chance to win. I think this Browns team is in the position to make the playoffs, and running DTR out there is probably going against that. And maybe I don't know why you would, but hey, I'm not an NFL coach.
But you play one on TV. So
yes.
Now when we look at this game, we have so many questions. The weather was supposed to be a big deal. It's going to be a deal, not a big deal. There's going to be some wind and some rain. The total on this thing is plummeted down to 32.5. And I know that it's hard in the National Football League for any of us to believe that a game could still play well under that. And I still think this game plays well under that. The Cleveland Browns defense is not good or great. It's otherworldly, and they're back home again where they have been so much better with the crowd noise on their side than every other defense in the world. On the other side of this game, I don't really understand what Doug Peterson's doing here. Like, there's no game plan mystery to try to figure out if it's Trevor Lawrence or if it's CJ Beathard, right? We don't trust either of them at this point. We don't trust Trevor Lawrence to be healthy enough to be Trevor Lawrence, and we don't trust CJ Beathard at all. And by the way, he's hurt. So I don't think the Jaguars are live to score a whole lot in this game. That being said, you're not getting me to bet into the Browns and whether I get Joe Flacco or Dorian Thompson-Robinson, which actually is a bit of a scheme difference. So that is something for the Jaguars to have to prepare for. I don't think the Jaguars defense is as bad as we saw last week. Just the same as I don't think the Jaguars defense is as good as when over the first 7 weeks of the year, they were number 2 in EPA, and I got fooled by them in that game against the San Francisco 49ers. So I actually think under is still the look here. 16-7, 10-7, 14-10, 14-13, 17-13, a bunch of scores that still get you under, and I don't see how any of the quarterbacks in this game, even a 70-60% Trevor Lawrence against this defense, is going to change that.
Steven, no Christian Kirk. He moves to IR. We know that Amari Cooper is still in concussion protocol, though it says, I guess, that it is within the realm of possibility for him to clear tomorrow, it says, but he is still in concussion protocol. So you have likely no Amari Cooper as well in this thing. So it's just a game of a massive amount of unknowns, like just so many things we have no idea about. I guess the only thing we do know is if Amari Cooper can't go, Elijah Moore is going to get the vast majority of the targets in this game for the Browns. What do you see here in this one, if anything?
Yeah, Elijah Moore, 12 targets last week, even though he only caught 4 of them. So if it is Joe Flacco, I think he is going to look to Elijah Moore again if Cooper can't pass the protocol. I agree with you that I think Flacco gives them the better chance, especially with the weather forecast improving. If it was going to be really windy and rainy, then maybe the mobile quarterback would have been helpful. But I think Flacco is a little bit more seasoned here. I don't think DTR really moves the needle for me. For what it's worth, just looking at last week's results on quarterbacks who had at least 20 plays, Flacco ranked 22nd out of 25 in EPA and CPOE composite, which is bad, but not as bad as what we've seen from like DTR and PJ Walker this year. So this is a complete unknown on the sides for me. I'll just mention maybe like a couple reception over props with the Kirk injury. It might mean Evan Ingram gets fed more, especially with a ferocious pass rush, and they're going to have to get rid of the ball. They've been featuring him a little bit more over the past couple of weeks, and especially when Kirk went down against Cincinnati. He's at 8 and 9 targets. And again, we mentioned the Elijah Moore potential here to have even more receptions than what he put up, because 4 out of 12 on the receptions is pretty weak, and I would expect him to catch more than 4 this week if Cooper's out.
Yeah, it's just a weird game. I just don't.
Matt, let me ask you one last question.
Yeah.
If Trevor Lawrence somehow is going to get trotted out there with some like crazy, robot brace on his leg, and they're going to try and let him give it a go, that probably means this line's going to move even more, and the Browns are going to be under a field goal. At that point, are you interested? Because yes, it's Trevor Lawrence, but also he's going to be a sitting duck back there against this pass rush.
Yeah, I mean, I hate betting on these teams that have no offense, but like,
right.
It's just because I think it's within it. I honestly think it is like a non-zero chance that the Jags could win this game outright, even with a statue Lawrence back there, whatever, because they just can't. The Browns just can't score enough, right? I mean, I think that's certainly within the
Would you tease
the range of outcomes. The Jags, for me, then at that point, would at least be an interesting teaser leg. I mean, 32.5, a Browns defense that has still continued to play at a pretty high level. This Jags defense, as Adam mentioned, I don't think they are as bad as we saw last week. By the way, a lot of air quote good defenses got torched last week. So, I mean, it's just like we're getting to the point in the season where maybe some of these guys get tired and like we're not going to see the absolute A+ effort each and every single week. But I mean, the Niners got torched last week. The Jags got torched last week. The Cowboys got torched. I mean, there's a lot, right? So anyway, just stuff to think about when it comes to that as well. Just a weird ass game. I don't know. I'm probably just going to sit that one out when it comes down to it. Detroit Lions, Chicago Bears. This is an expensive 3. There are 1, 2, 3 expensive 3s, and the rest are cheap 3.5s out there on the Lions on the road against the Bears. 43.5 is your total in this one. Adam, I said I'm going back to you 2 times in a row, so I'm going to let you kick this one off as well. We know that these are this is the Bear team coming out of a decent little stretch here where they have looked at least somewhat competent.
I mean, on defense, they've looked competent. Yeah, then that makes a big difference in this particular matchup against Tiny Hands Goff out in the weather. The only way I want to get involved in this game is on the prop side of things. I think we've seen enough from the Detroit Lions to know that Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson understand that with Frank Ragnow out of this game, Jonah Jackson beaten up, and Jared Goff performing outdoors generally the way Jared Goff performs outdoors in wet conditions, that this is not going to be a game where the Detroit Lions emphasize the passing game. I'm looking at rushing props throughout. I'm looking at yardage props throughout. I think that they're going to be too low because of what we've seen from the Chicago Bears on the defensive side of the ball. We've seen the Bears be one of the best defenses against the run in all of the league. However, I think Detroit is going to stick to that run this week against the Chicago Bears. If you want to play side total, I'd lean under the 43 just based on the fact that I don't think Chicago can move the ball a whole lot, even against this horrendous Detroit defense. I know we just saw it a couple of weeks ago where Chicago was able to put up 26 and then ended up losing that game at the end. Much better conditions indoors in Detroit, a different situation than you're going to have in this one.
Yeah, I'm on the other side of that. I have the overplayed in this one, over 42. I would still play it to the over 43. This Lions defense is just absolutely atrocious. I mean, last 6 games, they give 28 to the Saints, 29 to the Packers, 26 to the Bears, 38 to the Chargers, 38 to the Ravens. They only gave up, the only team that they've held under 26 points is the Raiders, who have cleared 21 points exactly one time this entire season. So I don't really tip my cap to them for doing that. Since week 8, this Lions defense, 31st in success rate allowed. And so they are just allowing every single team to play in front of schedule. And so with that being said, I'm actually pretty confident in the over in this one, because I think the Lions can do their part, and I think the Bears aren't going to have to do a ton to get this one over there. I actually ended up playing the Bears +4 as well whenever this thing came out. I missed the 4.5, did get in on the 4. I just don't believe this Lions team is built to have any sort of win at margin at this point with the way that this secondary is playing. And I think even as bad as Justin Fields has been from an accuracy standpoint over the course of his career, I still think they'll be able to move the ball here and keep this thing within a field goal. So I'm on the over. I'm on the Bears. What say you there, Steven?
I am on the over. I got it at 43. I am on the Bears. I bet it Chicago +4 earlier in the week. I think 3.5 is still good here. I agree. This defense is horrendous. They can't stop anybody. And on top of that, we have a matchup against Justin Fields, one of, if not the most mobile quarterbacks in the league. And the Lions defensive coordinator has been on record at the podium multiple times admitting that his defense struggles against mobile quarterbacks. And if you look at Fields' last 3 games against Chicago, over 100 rushing yards in all 3 of them, including 132 yards and 147 yards in the 2 meetings a year ago. His prop is sitting at low 60s right now for rushing yards. His rushing attempts prop is at 10.5 in those 3 games. He had 18, 10, and 13 rushing attempts. Oddly, he only has 1 rushing touchdown this year, but at 2-1, I think that's a decent anytime touchdown play this week as well. But I think combine the defensive issues with Detroit with the defensive improvement of Chicago, including Montez Sweat, one of the great pass rushers in the league, and Detroit's injuries on the offensive line. I can't see Detroit as constructed beating a lot of teams by margin right now. It's a tough ask, and they're leaking oil all over on defense. I can't back them as road favorites here to this degree.
Yeah. Anything on the other side of a field goal, I'm okay with. Once you get onto the 3, becomes a little less attractive to me in this one. And as far as the over goes for me, 43 is my cutoff here. We already talk about this a lot. Like 43, 44 become kind of key-ish numbers, that little band of 2 numbers. You're getting about 8.5% of games land on 43 or 44, which is fairly significant from a total standpoint. So I think anything over 43 is where I'd start to pump the brakes on the over, but anything at 43 or better, I would still be looking in that direction. And guys, listen, I don't play the narrative street stuff, and Adam, I actually have made fun of this a lot, but the Bears are on the clock at this point, and Justin Fields is playing for his job. I mean, like there's no doubt about that, right? I mean, like we are looking at a team that is now the Panthers are now two wins clear of the next closest team. They're going to have the number 1 pick, which would then go to the Bears. The Bears are going to have a decision whether they move on from Justin Fields and draft Caleb Williams or not. And just a little bit of a factor here in Justin Fields, maybe not being quite as reckless with the ball, maybe not being quite as I don't know. I mean, again, I don't play that narrative stuff very often, but this is very real. He certainly understands what's at stake here.
I think the coaching staff too, right, Adam? The coaching staff isn't safe either in this situation. And I think that might have been why we had such a weird game plan against Minnesota. They were just trying to win the game, and they were terrified that Fields was going to take sacks against the blitz. So it was like they had an automatic check to throw a screen every time. It was the most hilarious offensive game plan I've ever seen.
Man says he's never done it and then does it twice in one show. Let's talk about the Chicago Bears situation overall here. Who's going to be coaching this team next year, right? Who's going to be coaching the team? Who's going to be playing quarterback? There are a lot of questions that have to be answered about this Chicago franchise over the next few weeks. And to me, that actually makes them a really difficult team to try to handicap and bet on. But, I understand the logic that you guys have in terms of not wanting to get outside of a field goal with Detroit right now.
To be fair, even if you like Justin Fields, you still move on at this point. I mean, it's just You get a guy starting over on a rookie deal like this. I know this had nothing to do with this game in particular, but like,
man, I think just you and I are saying,
conversation. Yeah.
I think just you and I are saying that Fields and the coaching staff are highly motivated to do as well as possible the rest of the season. Like, they are separate from the front office, and they really need to show what they can do and play hard.
Listen, unless we're talking about New England right now, and they still managed to win a game last night, everyone's highly motivated to be able to do well. I understand what Matt's saying about Justin Fields maybe being less reckless and maybe thinking, hey, if I have less turnovers, maybe they'll want to not get rid of me. I think that decision is already made within the offices of the Chicago Bears and Ryan Poles.
You'd like to think anyway. I mean, you'd like to think that that's going to be, because again, they have to move on. Tampa Bay Bucks and the Atlanta Falcons. This is 1.5 all the way to 2.5, which is interesting out there right now in favor of the Falcons at home against the Bucks. 40.5 to 41 is your total. Steven, it's your turn this time to lead us off here with this one.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, we got Chris Godwin's wife taken to social media saying they don't know how to use her husband properly, and he has to come in and clean up the mess and all the stuff that's going on with that. And you got a Bucs team that we said they're going to be as good as their health takes them. Their health turned against them. It took longer than I thought, but their health turned against them. They're missing 4 or 5 starters on the defensive side of the ball, and that's why they find themselves as dogs to a Falcons team that's not any good either. They're terrible too, but it's a Falcons team that can almost take a stranglehold on the division with a win this week. What do you see in this one?
Did you say that the defenses are pretty banged up in this game? Like
yeah.
Both of them? That has me very interested in the over. I was already interested in the over before we had so many bodies on both sides here defensively, looking like they're either going to have to play really banged up or not play at all. First meeting between these two teams, only 29 points, but you have to look deeper than that. 1 for 7 combined in the red zone. Atlanta specifically 1 for 5 in the red zone, which I think is maybe why Eli Hershkovich on our sister show, Beat the Closing Number, is betting Atlanta just to win this game. I think he got -1.5. So you can go listen to that if you want to hear his reasons why. I opted for the over because I think there's some potential red zone regression here. It wasn't just that Atlanta went 1 for 5 in the red zone. It's that both teams combined for 4 turnovers in the game in scoring position, including 2 for the Falcons at the 1-yard line. I mean, that is horrible scoring luck. Overall, 6.3 yards per play in the first meeting against a much healthier Tampa defense, and Tampa's offense, 5.1 yards per play, about league average, pretty respectable. So this to me is kind of a similar cap of what I talked about with Indy, Tennessee last week, which sailed over even if you take away the block punts. I just think there's a lot of positive regression potential here in a game where we don't have to worry about weather, indoors in a dome, and a pretty low number here at 40.5. I'm not scared off about how Atlanta looked against a very good Jets defense last week.
Yeah, I would be on the regression train, Adam, if it wasn't Arthur Smith who's calling the plays and he's a dope. So like, that's my only problem with all of that is like if there was the assumption of rational coaching, then sure, I could kind of get on with that. The problem is Arthur Smith like thinks he's the smartest guy in the room at the most inopportune times. And it basically continues to crush this team. Bijan Robinson's reception props only at 2.5. I think like he's beginning to get used a whole lot more in the pass game. I think that's at least somewhat interesting for me, but I don't have a firm grasp on how I would go about playing this. What say you?
Talking about those Tampa defensive injuries. So we know that Jamel Dean is going to be out of this game. We know that Vita Vea is a question mark at this point, and that is the question mark I want the answer to, because we know that Arthur Smith, as you just mentioned, and Atlanta love to run the ball in inefficient ways. And if any one player on the Tampa Bay defense will make the decision as to whether or not you're able to run the ball, it is Vita Vea for Tampa. So I already like Tampa as a teaser leg out to 8.5 in wherever spot you can get it, or 8. I continue to believe that the Atlanta Falcons suck and suck hard. I continue to believe that they are not capable of beating anybody by multiple scores. And I still think that Baker Mayfield is an order of measure better than whoever you're going to play at quarterback, which is going to be Desmond Ridder. But Desmond Ridder is the biggest part of why the Falcons suck and suck hard. And so I don't believe that that's going to change no matter who's in or who's out for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I like Tampa as a teaser leg.
It's going to be an interesting. I cannot believe. I can't believe the Falcons might host a playoff game. I mean, it's. We got.
Can we take a moment and talk about that? That like we have a schedule of 17 games, and only 6 of those are in division. But we're automatically going to give a home playoff game to the 4 seed. Like, can we stop with this and just go with best record regardless of division? That would actually make sense.
Yes, they need to just seed. However, yes, according to wins and losses, whatever. Like, this is insanity. Like, this is the Falcons might host. This might host a playoff.
It's not 30 years ago where 8 of your 16 games were in the division. Like, it's not.
Our philosophical podcast runs on Mondays. Next game.
If anyone's wondering if someone has anywhere to be, yes, we are.
You think?
No
one needs to hear a rant about divisions. Divisions are an antiquated concept. Next.
Houston Texans, New York Jets. The Texans are 3.5-point road favorites over the Jets. 33.5 is your total. Jets going back to Zach Wilson. In this one, the Texans, it was looking promising for Dalton Schultz, and now it says, coming through the old Twitter machine here, that he is doubtful to go for the Texans. We know they lost Tank Dell last week as well. So this leads us to a very interesting handicap, Adam, because it comes down to, okay, Texans, definitely better than the Jets, but down 2 of their major weapons that have been an integral part of their success all season long on the road against the Jets defense that, yeah, I guess you can run on them a little bit of late, but you still can't really pass on them here in all this on the other side of a field goal. It's a pretty interesting handicap.
Going to be rain, going to be wind, going to be the best defense that CJ Stroud has gone against this year. And that makes me want to vomit when I think of the fact that I like the Jets in this game plus the 3.5. And it's largely a numbers play in a game where the expected total is as low as this one is, in a game where, believe it or not, we have actually seen what the difference is between Zach Wilson and Tim Boyle and Trevor Siemian. And we're back to Zach Wilson, and it is by far the best available of the 3. And so, yes, the Jets are beaten up. Yes, the Houston Texans have by far the better quarterback. I do not believe that the Houston Texans are going to be able to run this out against the Jets. I think the Jets defense shows in this game. If you don't necessarily buy the Jets to cover 3.5, if you think this game is a 14-7 or something along those lines, then just play it under.
Yeah, it's Steven, like we saw, at least because Tank Dell was hurt very early in the game. So like we did see this Texans offense at least function well without Tank Dell and Schultz, because Schultz didn't play last week either. But it certainly is different now for teams to prep for the Texans, because now they don't have to prep for Tank Dell being in that offense. And they also don't have to prep for Dalton Schultz being in there as well too. I'm not saying we're definitely going to get a clunker out of the Texans in this one, but I guess if there ever were a spot in which a clunker wouldn't surprise me, this would be kind of where I would be looking on that Texan schedule.
Yeah, but there's also an outcome here where the Texans offense has a clunker and still wins 13-3.
Oh, for sure.
You know?
No, for sure. Absolutely. There is, in my personal opinion, I have zero, my power ratings don't change at all between Boyle, Siemian, Zach Wilson. If they go and bring Vinny Testaverde back, it doesn't matter. Like it does, like it is, this team is what it is. It is a bottom 2 offense in the entire NFL. And that's just, to me, it doesn't matter who's out there. Zach Wilson brings you a tiny bit of scrambling upside is basically all it comes down to for me.
Yeah, I understand the numbers play for Adam, and it makes sense. This is just my subjective opinion. I have zero interest in betting on Zach Wilson, even though it was clear that he is not as bad as Tim Boyle. Tim Boyle, I think we well documented on this podcast, was one of, if not the worst quarterback in NFL history, at least in the modern era where we have statistics. Like, he was the nut low. But a friendly reminder that among all quarterbacks with at least 200 plays this year, Zach Wilson is dead last in EPA and CPOE composite. And among quarterbacks with at least 100 plays, he's only ahead of Phillip Walker and DTR on the Browns. So their best option
is still terrible.
Mean it's good.
Yes. No, their best option is still terrible. Yes. No, their best option is still terrible. Yes.
Yeah. So at the same time, Tank Dell's a big deal not having him. I don't care as much about Dalton Schultz. They seem fine without him. But it may be a spot where maybe the Jets get an early field goal or something, and I can get the Texans under a field goal in the live market. But with the weather and the rain and the randomness that presents, I'm not interested in a side here, but it's never the Jets for me. That's just my opinion at this point. I hate betting on these teams that have quarterbacks that are not viable, that have a good defense. There's been too many instances over the past couple of years where these defenses just, give up or fall flat when the offense just can't move the ball.
Yeah. So the Jets only giving up 56 yards per game to wide receiver ones. And that changes a lot if you have a secondary or a third option, right? And it's like without Dell, without Schultz, if they go out and just really lock down on Nico Collins, now you're asking a lot of Stroud when he's having to go to all these kind of like, wide receiver 4s and wide receiver 5s that are having to like play pretend that they're 2s and 3s. And so that's the thing that just keeps me think it's a big spot here for the Texans. I don't know, man. Like I just can't quite get there. Seattle Seahawks and San Francisco 49ers. This is 10.5-11 in favor of the 49ers at home over the Seahawks. It is 46.5 to 47 is the total. This got as high as 12.5. It was almost going to get to 13. They said that was too much, Steven. It gets bought all the way back down to 10.5. Now we're seeing 11s pop back up. So some more Niners money does start to trickle in to the market here. Niners, number one in my power ratings, number one in your power ratings. It is a team that is, when healthy, I truly believe the best team in the NFL. Absolute truck. That being said, it's kind of a little bit different than in years past where the defense is not like inside this elite conversation with it. It's not a top 5 defense. It is a top 12 defense. It's a top 15 defense, but it's not like, oh, not only do they have what's going on in the offense, but they got this super elite defense. Like that's not the case this year with them. And so the question is, I don't think we're asking whether we think the Seahawks are going to pull the outright upset. It's just, can they do enough to keep it within double digits?
Yeah, I've watched all of these Niners Seahawks games as a Niners fan in recent years, and I've yet to see Seattle be really competitive in one for a full game. I've seen them be competitive for a half, and then they get dump trucked. So I'm just not going to be interested in Seattle here, despite how they looked in an island game on Thursday night against Dallas's defense. They need to show me that they can be competitive against the 49ers at some point. And I certainly understand that this would constitute buying high on the Niners and buying low on the Seahawks if you're interested in Seattle. But I need to see it first with Seattle. So I'm not interested in this game. I would only be interested in the Niners live here if they get off to a slow start off of what was clearly the game that they cared about most on their regular season schedule last week. So I'm going to stay away for now. But yeah, just too many examples in recent years that they just don't seem to match up well with the Niners.
Adam, I'm just going to throw this out there. If you do think that this spread is accurate and this game's going to play the way that it is, I'll just say Jackson Smith and Jigba's receiving yards is 42.5 out there right now. And he is not necessarily the wide receiver 2 now, but he has definitely eaten into targets that Tyler Lockett was getting. And his participation in this offense has been much more of late. And if we think they are trailing and just having to throw all the time, 42.5 is pretty low in my personal opinion for JSN. But again, that just depends on what you think the game script is and how you think this game's going to play out.
Yeah, you're thinking the same way I am, Matt. I don't want anything to do with side or total here. I like to talk about it on this podcast just in case that's the way people want to play it. If I'm looking any particular way, I'm going to put the number on it at 47. If right now you see a San Francisco 49ers game with a total that is under 47, you have to at least do some research to say, do I believe the other team can score 14 points? Because the Niners are live for over 30 in just about every game they walk into this year. So that would be the lean for me if you were to make me play side or total in this thing. However, I think the right way to go about this is to look at Geno's passing props. I think when you look at what the Seattle Seahawks are going to be forced to do in this game, it's all going to involve Geno Smith. I think if you want to get squirrely and go and look at some alts and say, if you don't believe that the San Francisco 49ers passing defense is going to be able to slow down Seattle, if you think that this game plays to some sort of shootout level, then you can go and get Geno Smith. First of all, just in case you're playing it right now, 239.5 at DraftKings for Geno Smith. But you increase that by a mere total of 36 yards, and you're up over plus 200. And I think there's well within the realm of possibility that the Seattle Seahawks, because they have a couple of explosive receivers, because they can throw the ball deep, and because they're probably going to be throwing the ball a lot, can get to that number. I think you can look at attempts, which are currently sitting 34.5. I think you can look at completions, which are currently sitting 21. It seems to me that Seattle is going to be in a spot where, despite the fact that Pete Carroll wants to run the football, he's got two banged up running backs in Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, and he's going to have to be throwing the ball behind against San Francisco.
Yeah, the pass attempts is really intriguing to me. I just did my quick little napkin math projections, and so I would come out closer to 39, considering how I have the game script going and how this, to me, seems like the game state is going to go. So I think there's a decent little edge on 34.5. So I certainly would be looking towards the over on that as we look for reference in a shootout last week in which they were having to kind of go score for score. And we think, hey, look, they're going to have to score to keep in this game with the 49ers. He threw 41 times against the Cowboys last week. So I like the over 34.5 for sure in that one. Something he was able to accomplish despite the time of possession being outweighed 36 minutes to 23 minutes for the Cowboys as opposed to the Seahawks. So something that's, again, prop for me in this one. Geno pass attempts, JSN overs, stuff like that for me. Minnesota Vikings and the Las Vegas Raiders. 40.5 is your total. The Vikings are favored by 3 on the road here in this one. Steven, I'm going to steal everyone's thunder here. I put it in the account. I put the Vikings in at 2.5. I assumed it was going to be Dobbs. I was right. It is Dobbs. I didn't get why they would go away from Dobbs, so that didn't make a ton of sense to me anyway. So Dobbs plays one bad game, and now we're benching him. I don't think that's the case. I understand there were turnover-worthy plays, but there were also plays that were being made by Dobbs. And so the one kind of outlier 4-pick game I didn't think was going to get him benched. And further, he hasn't had a chance to play with the best receiver in the NFL yet, which is making his return in this game against the Raiders. There's no home field advantage at all for the Raiders, so I didn't even factor that in the least bit. So I thought under a field goal was not enough. And so even though we're at 3 right now, it's a cheap 3. So you could either buy off the 3 at a reduced rate or play a cheap 3. I would still do it with the Vikings in this. The Vikings defense actually has really outperformed anything and everything we thought of them heading into this season. What do you see here, Vikings Raiders?
You are going up against our fearless director, Brett Colson, who bet Raiders +3 this week. And I think the argument here,
he can push and I can win. So fine. That's fine. That's fine.
True. That's
he
fair.
Can push. I'll win. It's fine.
There we go. Yeah. What is Justin Jefferson worth to the spread for you? Because that is where this comes down to for me. If you look at the market consensus ratings from a couple of weeks ago, when Justin Jefferson wasn't on the field, this is pretty close to a pick 'em in it for a game in Las Vegas. And this number, if it's at 3, is giving 2 to 3 points for Justin Jefferson, if my math is correct. So is that accurate? Do you think that Justin Jefferson being back and a Josh Dobbs offense should ever be 3 on the road here against Las Vegas? That's the question I have, and I don't know I have a good answer to it.
Yeah, I mean, to me, in my personal thing, I have Justin Jefferson as the highest rated wide receiver to a point spread outside of Tyreek Hill. So I have him at like 1.7 points to a point spread. That might be a little high because that was probably based on Cousins as well. And he still has to get the ball thrown to him, I guess. But until I see that Dobbs can't get him the ball, I can't really downgrade that. It's far easier to get the ball to a guy who gets open all the time. So there's that for me. So I have him pretty high. So I have him worth 1.7 points.
Yeah, I'll kick it to you, Adam. I don't have a strong opinion on this game, but that was the big question I wanted to ask you guys.
You will never, in the remaining history of football handicapping, get a better price on Justin Jefferson's props than you will this week, where people for some reason appear to have some level of doubt as to either Minnesota's ability to get him the ball or whether or not he's healthy. Guys, he's healthy. He could have played 2 weeks ago. They decided to hold him out more as a precaution than they did because he wasn't ready to go, because they were going to get the extra time to get him ready. 65.5 is the yardage prop on Justin Jefferson this week. Guys, the last 3 games before he was injured, 149, 159, 150. In a game in which he only had 6 catches in week 2, he had 80-plus yards. Guys, this Raiders defense is not good. They do not have a single cornerback who's going to be able to stay anywhere near Justin Jefferson. Over 100 yards is plus 320. I'm not sure there's a prop I like more this week because Josh Dobbs is going to force feed the ball to Justin Jefferson. He is going to be so happy to have the best weapon in this offense back, and the Raiders aren't going to be able to do a whole lot about it. Max Crosby is their biggest edge. We know this. Well, Minnesota has the best neutralizer in the league, in that this is the best offensive line in the league, at least in terms of who's on the field right now and healthy and ready to play for them. So I think they're going to be able to protect Josh Dobbs. I think they're going to be able to get Justin Jefferson the ball consistently. If you want to play it more conservatively over 65, I think you're looking at one of the single best props of the season. I think if you want to get aggressive and look at over 100 yards, you're getting a plus 320 price on a guy who did it with ease in his last 3 games.
I'm in.
I also think this too, like on top of that, Adam, like they just, because Jefferson is back does not automatically mean that Jordan Addison now is going to take this like massive backseat and get no action whatsoever. 33.5 receiving yards for Jordan Addison. The over 3.5 receptions for him is, you're getting plus 120 on 4 catches for Jordan Addison. So it's like you said, it's like there's doubt on Jefferson. And then because Jefferson is back, like we're plummeting Addison now to like wide receiver 3 numbers in an offense that, if anything, getting Jefferson back should help him get open easier, because like he's not going to be getting the number 1 receiver treatment. I think this is a pretty big overreaction. As you mentioned, like, I don't think we see numbers even close to this over the rest of the season. I think either one I'm perfectly fine with. It would shock me actually if both of them don't go over these numbers. Like it would, if we are sitting here talking and Addison doesn't have 35 receiving yards in this game and Jefferson doesn't have 68 receiving yards in this game, I would be floored. Like I would absolutely be floored. So that's a decent alternate angle to look at this as well. And if you don't want to play the Vikings, look at it this way. It's like a dual bet, right? If the Vikings have success and beat this Raiders team by more than a field goal, it's likely because he's connecting with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. If they get down somehow to this Raiders team, then he's just throwing the ball all over the place to Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison in likely softer coverage because the Raiders are not playing as tight on them and all this. So it's almost like a 2-way bet that you get in this one. So yes, love that. Love you pointing that out. And again, I'm already on the Minnesota side here. Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs. What a treat we get in this one. 1.5 in favor of the Chiefs. 48.5 to 49 is your total. Adam, I'll kick it to you here. We see The Bills team coming out of a bye. And so this is, listen, at least somewhat interesting. They get a week to late in the season, try to assess what was going on the defensive side of the ball. Is there any changes that need to be made? We know the offense was still functioning at a pretty high level.
This is where we start to see the net rest edge that's so bad for Kansas City this year start to really play out, where Buffalo has had a chance. As you mentioned, they come off the bye, and not only do they start to look good offensively in that Philadelphia game in particular, but they've got a little time finally to start to adjust to some of the defensive injuries that they've had. And maybe, fingers crossed on this one, maybe they are able to figure something out defensively against the Kansas City Chiefs, which is not the same as it's been in past years. Look, I'm not selling Kansas City to the level that I've heard some people sell Kansas City. Some of the games the Chiefs have lost this year have been on absolutely fluky type things. That being said, I think Buffalo as a teaser leg here is your safest option. And I know you're going to hear a lot of smart people, I bet you on this podcast, talk about having already taken Buffalo +3 or still taking Buffalo on the money line. And all of those things are absolutely fine for me. I've seen Josh Allen be Josh Allen too many times this year for me to trust Buffalo in that kind of situation. I just don't trust that he's not going to go out there and have another one of these 2 or 3 interception games that screws up my handicap. But that being said, I also don't trust that the Chiefs can turn all of those into a ton of points. And so for me, Buffalo at up to 7.5 is where I like this as a teaser leg that I'm pairing up with Tampa from earlier and one other game this week.
So you're right. I played the Bills on the money line +120. I missed the 2.5. And so once I missed the 2.5, I'm just going to go ahead and play it on the money line at that point. So the Chiefs offense, Steven, we've talked about it. Like I've been very vocal about how this offense has gone in these gigantic spurts where they just don't produce, and it has started to catch up with them. And then further, they're dealing with a lot of injuries. Drew Tranquill, Pacheco, Smith, Cook, all these guys that are hurt that we're going to have to see whether they're going to be able to play or not, or what their status is going to be. And then the other thing about this is the Chiefs were getting by with this offense sputtering because of the defense playing at such a high level. Over the last month, the Chiefs defense is 25th in EPA per play allowed. They are 23rd in dropback EPA allowed. PFF has them 22nd in coverage grade. This defense that we were saying, hey, look how amazing this defense is, that's how they're winning these games, has started to slip specifically through the air with these teams, which, as we know, is the much more efficient way to move the ball anyway. So I don't think that's great. And to a little bit of a counter to Adam's point on the Josh Allen thing, he's still second in the NFL in total EPA. He's 4th in the NFL in CPOE. He is the 2nd overall graded quarterback according to Pro Football Focus on the season. And as much as we talk about him being careless, and it seems like he's just more careless in inopportune times, but we bring up turnover-worthy plays all the time on this show. He's tied for 16th in the NFL in turnover-worthy plays. He's behind Tua, Mahomes, Purdy, Stroud, Herbert, all these other guys that have more turnover-worthy plays than Allen does over the course of the season. So I get it. They're kind of inopportune sometimes, but I think we think he's putting the ball in harm's way a little bit more than is what actually is happening in all actuality. Yeah, Adam?
Yeah, Steven, I just want to I want to push back directly on that in the moment. I wasn't saying that's why I don't want to bet Josh Allen. I'm saying that's why I'm betting Buffalo the way that I'm betting Buffalo, is to say I like the teaser and the idea of, hey, this could get a little funky here because of the potential for turnovers, because 16th isn't 32nd, it's 16th. It's still just more variance that I don't want to be on Buffalo in terms of having to play them at less than a field goal. So I just don't want to get that to get lost in the way that I was talking about it.
Yeah, for me, I've been lower on this Chiefs teams than everybody has all season long. You guys know it's so there might be a little bit of a bias in this for me. But that being said, I was not high on the Bills either. So the fact that I am coming in on the Bills on the money line just lets you know kind of how I think that this could play out, given Bills coming off of a bye, given the injury situations for the Chiefs, and given the fact that we've seen this Chiefs defense start to give it up through the air a little bit more here, and we know that the Bills can still move the ball. Steven, the court is yours, my friend.
Yeah, I think we have seen over and over again that elite defense with a sputtering offense isn't sustainable in this league with the way the rules are if you're going to play quality opponents. And I think we've seen a little bit of that with Kansas City in recent weeks, where the defense has a bad game and they can't survive. So I think probably it sounds like we all agree that the best unit on the field in this game is the Buffalo offense, at least from what they've put on the field so far this year. And the advanced stats back that up. As of right now, this would be the first season in the Patrick Mahomes era where Kansas City does not finish top 5 in either EPA or success rate. And across the board, the Buffalo offense has been better by these advanced stats than Kansas City has been. So I landed on the teaser leg the way that Adam did for the same reasons that he mentioned, at least a couple of concerns that he had, but wouldn't argue with you on the price here, Matt. But I'll just say, like, this is the most fascinating spread of the week by far, because what is home field advantage at Arrowhead worth? Because we all understand and have been told that it's one of, if not the best home field advantages in the NFL. So if we're giving them 2 points, 2.5 points for home field advantage, this current spread and the professional money in the market is telling us that the rest advantage is worth more than the spread saying that the Chiefs are actually not as good as the Bills on a neutral field. Because if you strip out home field, this spread is screaming that the Bills are actually the better team on a neutral field. But I agree with you that the rest advantage and a couple injuries here are playing a huge part in why this number is what it is.
Adam, this is actually, I think, a good time for us as we get into the home stretch here, just real quick. Like, so now that we've got a body of work, we've looked at all this stuff. Where are you with home field advantage right now as far as your handicapping goes? Because I can tell you from my personal experience, like, I never go more than 1.5, and I only go 1.5 to a place like Kansas City, Philly, the Superdome at night, like not a morning game or whatever, but like certain things like that. But like Raiders, none. LA, none. Like what? So like, a lot of these teams don't have any. I gave absolutely zero. Miami, none. Like, so where are you from your handicapping from a home field advantage standpoint?
Before I get to the point on that, I missed and just saw the fact that Seattle has made a QB signing to its practice squad. Geno Smith limited with a groin injury, so definitely take that into consideration with what we just talked about with the Seattle props. If Geno is limited with a groin injury, he's already limited under pressure, and that would take me directly off anything related to Geno.
And as you say that, as a good thing we're talking about this game, it is official. Pacheco is out. So get your Clyde Edward-Helaire in your lineups if you're playing fantasy. Go get you some CEH. Yeah.
Yeah, so in terms of home field advantages, the one you didn't mention for me that's a 1.5 is Minnesota. Minnesota is demonstrably better at home. And overall, I actually do tend to default to 1 just because I don't want to react too much to individual seasons. And I try to go back to the fact that for so many years we made it 3, which was clearly too much. But 1.5 is the top number for me. I default to 1 unless there's a reason to come off 1. And even for Vegas, with the fact that it's almost all opposing fans in that stadium, maybe you consider it in that spot because now you don't have any sort of long-term feel for what a home field advantage is in Vegas in a stadium that they've played with fans in only 3 years now.
But Adam, would you agree that there's at least some influential money in the market that is giving more for home field than we are? Because I'm more in line with you guys, but like I've gotten pushback on that. I've even had somebody who I respect in recent weeks tell me like Philadelphia should still get 2.5 for home field.
I mean, I think if we're going to start to try to get into the idea of what respected money thinks, the spreadsheets and algorithms and access to insider information and things that they have is so far beyond anything that we're going to be able to talk about on this podcast that I'm not going to get to thinking too much about it. But if you have someone that you respect who believes that a particular home field is worth 2.5, sure, I don't agree, but I understand the fact that there are a lot of people smarter at this than I am, and if they see it, then I respect it.
Yeah, I guess for me, and we'll move on, but for me, if we used to think 2.5, 3, back in the day where like all of the things that went into that still only got us to 2.5 and 3. And then now so much of that is stripped away. They're not traveling by bus. They're not traveling even by, like, everything's private. They're on, like, the travel schedules are like literally broken down to a fine art. They're traveling with chefs. They're doing all these things that used to factor into a road game being so much tougher is now like just not into effect. It really only comes down to like crowd noise really at this point. And so for me, it's just kind of like, 1.5, I'll give you 1.5. But outside of that, it seems like we're really trying to like bake in just how much that affects.
Even if it's a 1.5, it still makes this spread very fascinating for this week and this week only.
I'm glad we're on this game. By the way, guys, all 4 of those guys that I mentioned are out for the Chiefs. So
here we go.
Pacheco is out. Their left tackle, Donovan Smith, is out. Drew Tranquill, who is by proxy their green dot linebacker, is out. And then Brian Cook, safety, is out. So it is not a great injury report there for the Kansas City Chiefs either in this one. All right, Denver Broncos and the Los Angeles Chargers, 2.5 to 3 in favor of the Chargers at home over the Broncos. 43.5 to 44 is your total. Adam, real quick on this one, I have almost no interest in this game whatsoever. I think the range of outcomes is almost infinite. It just, these games. So I have my, put this game on a rocket and shoot it into the sun and fire and blow it up. This was the first game for me. I took it, scratched it off, wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. So hopefully you guys can share some insight as to what you guys think here in this thing. I mean, I'm sure there's a case to be made for the Broncos on a teaser leg because the Chargers just can't win anything at margin, but that's about the only thing I could really come up here with. What say you?
That's exactly what I have, is Denver on the teaser leg. And that is even with me having been right last week in saying I thought that Denver was too fraudulent to go on the road and win in Houston. Russ turned the ball over 3 times. Now, they did have a chance to score at the end of the game, but you know what they didn't do? They didn't score at the end of the game. And so they lost, and they didn't cover, and the under that I thought was probably the right side got there as well. So this week, do I still think Denver is fraudulent? Yup. Do I think the Los Angeles Chargers are a dumpster fire? Absolutely. There's no chance in hell at this point that the money in my pocket will ever be on the Los Angeles Chargers laying points against a reasonable team. I don't trust them in any facet of the game. Maybe Keenan Allen truly is healthy, right? Maybe he's better now. I don't think he's going to be full speed, and he sure as hell didn't look at last time out. So Denver might not be what everyone thought they were going to be, but they are sure as hell not 8.5 points worse than the Los Angeles Chargers.
What say you there, Steven?
Yeah, I agree. I'm betting the teaser leg too. In fact, I was just looking down to get that in with the Bills teaser as the other side here because I'm not sure that's going to last much longer with these Chiefs injuries. I'm not sure the Bills are going to be in the teaser zone, but there's a couple other games that would be good fits here for Denver up to 8.5. Just keep an eye out to see if the Chargers activate Josh Palmer off IR for this game. He actually did matter for this offense to give them a secondary option other than Keenan Allen. We saw what happened last week when a defense has the ability to just strip away Keenan Allen, what's left for the Chargers offense. So even if he plays, it doesn't scare me away from the Denver teaser leg, but whether he plays or not is the reason I haven't pulled the trigger yet on the under. I don't see how either of these offenses are all that impressive. I gave Russell Wilson one chance last week to actually show it, and he rewarded me with 3 terrible interceptions. So, yeah, I'm good with that, and I think 44 is pretty high. I was pretty surprised to see this total at 44 with what we know about the Chargers' offense at this point. So I'm just keeping an eye to see whether they activate Josh Palmer or not. If they don't, then I will be betting under 44 in this.
Sunday Night Football features the Philadelphia Eagles at the Dallas Cowboys. As of this recording, we are sitting 3.5 in favor of the Cowboys, though it is a cheap 3.5. 51.5 to 52 is your total. Steven, we've seen version 1 of this game. We know it could have gone either way. It was a very tightly contested game. And here we have the Cowboys coming home. That being said, other side of a field goal seems like a tall task. What say you?
It would certainly be a buy low spot for the Eagles numerically here, but I'm a little gun shy because, at least in terms of the matchup and the rest advantages with that Dallas has here, the latest in a long list of tough games for the Eagles here in a row, plus another rest advantage for their opponent with the Cowboys having played on Thursday the week before. The Eagles' defense against the pass has been miserable. They are outside the top 20 in advanced metrics, and Dak has been on fire. So I think Dallas Goedert coming back for the Eagles is a big deal, so you don't have to throw to the shell of Julio Jones and Zacchaeus as much as they have been anymore if Goddard is back. I don't have a strong opinion just if you're coming in without any other interest in betting this game. What I will tell you is that I am holding a Dak MVP ticket at 40-1. And because of that, I did bet Eagles plus 3.5 because it basically becomes a middle for me in some ways. If the Eagles win, then I think that's a big dent into Dak Prescott's candidacy. If the Eagles lose, but lose by a field goal, I cash that bet, and my Dak 40-1 ticket is still very much alive. And if the Cowboys win by more than 3, then I don't care that I lost my side bet on Eagles plus 3.5 because I have this fat 40-1 ticket that probably is looking even better because they will have beaten the Eagles by more than 3. And the other note I'll mention is, like, in recent weeks, I've said that I think Dak probably has to win the division to win MVP. I'm not sure I believe that anymore because I said that based on recent results and what we've seen from MVPs. But when Peter King comes out and says that he doesn't need the Cowboys to win the division for him to vote on Dak to win MVP, that makes me pay attention and makes me think that there are maybe some more avenues for this ticket to get home in future weeks here. I haven't done anything with Purdy. I'm waiting on that. I still think he has to be the 1 seed. And if it winds up him versus Dak, I still am skeptical that people are going to pick Purdy over Dak if he's putting up the numbers that he is with the Cowboys. And the last thing I'll note is that there's still a situation here where the Cowboys take a couple more losses with how tough their schedule is. If the Eagles lose, then Hurts' candidacy gets worse. Purdy, I'm not sure is the universal MVP candidate for his team with the media. There's still been some Christian McCaffrey love. So I don't think that Tyreek Hill is completely dead to win this award. So that is the one small hedge I put, just doing round numbers here. Like, let's say you have the potential to win $1,000 on Dak Prescott to win MVP. I don't really have an issue with taking 50 of that and putting it on Tyreek Hill at 16-1 this week. So that's how I looked at the MVP situation with Dak. And I bet Eagles plus 3.5 because I have the Dak ticket in my pocket.
Adam, it does look like Goddard's going to be back. He's been practicing in full. So again, these guys are superhuman. He gets a rod in his arm. 2 weeks later, he's playing football again, whatever. I don't get how they do it. It is what it is, but I guess it's worth noting. The Cowboys are 23rd in the NFL versus tight ends. We know that Goddard, when healthy, and again, this wasn't a lower body injury, so running routes and whatever you would think should be the same. It was an arm injury. When healthy, Goddard certainly one of the better tight ends in all of the NFL.
So the handicap for me this week is 2 things. First of all, I made the mistake last week of ignoring some loud noise in the market about the San Francisco 49ers and where the Philadelphia Eagles were and what that matchup looked like. And I was leaned toward the Philadelphia side. And now I'm not going to ignore that noise this week. However, you're also not going to get me to say that the Dallas Cowboys are 3.5 full points better than the Philadelphia Eagles. What I think your handicap needs to be on this is if you believe that Philadelphia is still live, right? If you don't think that Philadelphia has hit some sort of lull that it's not going to be able to pull itself out of, I think you go ahead and play Philadelphia either on the money line or you go ahead and play Philadelphia out to -2.5, which is plus 176. Money line at DraftKings is plus 150. And Matt has given you a version of this handicap earlier this year when it comes to Miami against Kansas City. And you're going to say either it works or it doesn't, right? And you have to believe with Philadelphia, either it works or it doesn't, because they can't chase. That's the one thing we know about the way this Eagles offense is set up, is that if you get them down by a couple of scores, they are not a team that is just going to rise up from the dead without the help of Josh Allen throwing the ball directly to James Bradberry like they had with that game against Buffalo a couple of weeks ago. So I don't have a strong feeling on this game. I would, if I were going to play a Philadelphia alt just based on the value and the fact that I've had this team power rated better than Dallas for most of the year.
Yeah, so I do a show, lines are opening as I'm on air. It opened at 3, and I was like, man, if 3.5 hits, I'm gonna play the Eagles. I was actually hoping that the recency bias from that 49ers game was going to creep in here. You guys know my opinion on the game last week. I'm a huge Eagles guy, and I said they were not going to win that game. I was very, very adamant that the 49ers were going to win that game and win that game handily, given all the things that we knew heading into that one. I think this is a massive overreaction to move this all the way to the other side of a field goal. If you look at this Dallas defense, where I'm wondering if they're not bad. This is not what I'm saying. I'm saying I wonder if we have overvalued this defense, because if you go and you look, and like any team with a pulse has been able to put up points against this defense, right? I mean, it's just like the teams that are dead are the teams that can't score. The Giants, the Jets, the Patriots, the Giants again, the Panthers, the Commanders, like all these teams that like didn't score and have all these, but who did score? The Seahawks scored. The Eagles scored when they played the Eagles. The Rams scored. The 49ers thumped them with 42 points. Like I'm just not willing to buy in that this Eagles team can't score points against this Cowboys defense. And if that's the case, the other side of a field goal to me is an overreaction to a very horrible place in the schedule for the Eagles last week, in which the outcome, in my opinion, was not obvious, but certainly something I saw coming. And so I don't get it, guys. Eagles offense is still good. Yeah, the defense has some stuff to be worked out, but again, I think so does Dallas's. I truly believe that. I think so does Dallas's. So other side of a field goal to me, too much in this one. I played the 3.5. I feel comfortable with the 3.5. I still have the Eagles power rated second. And if that's the case, then I have to take 3.5 in this. Like I have to take the other side of a field goal.
Yeah. And I'm right there with you that I still have Philadelphia power rated second. I mean, my rating on this game is basically a pick when you factor in a home field. Mm-hmm. And so that to me is where I landed, where I did. I want to go back to the, I guess it's kind of the audio version of that Sunny in Philadelphia meme where the guy's going crazy and you got all the conspiracy lines pointing all over the chart with what Steven was talking about with MVP a few minutes ago, because there was a lot in there. The one thing I would say is, first of all, I was wrong. I need to say that from the start. I was wrong about Dak's MVP candidacy not being alive anymore. That being said, I definitely want in on Purdy sooner than later, and I wanted it in last week on Purdy at 13 when he was still sitting there for MVP at 13, if I'm holding Dak at some sort of larger number. Because if you think Philadelphia falls off a cliff here, then you think San Francisco is probably going to end up with the number 1 seed. Their schedule coming in is a lot better than Dallas's is, and I think the noise is going to get really, really loud for Brock Purdy to have a serious MVP candidacy if the 49ers end up looking the way they've looked over the last few weeks for the rest of the season. And so do I think he's necessarily going to win? I don't know. But at the prices it still is right now, it shouldn't be for Brock Purdy.
Guys, let's end it on this because we didn't touch on this, but it's the biggest total we've seen in quite a while, right? 52 points in this one. Adam, look, 27-24. 31-20, like all these are all 51s, right? We're sitting at 52. I'm not saying it can't get to 53. It's just it's a lot of points. It's a lot of points in today's NFL, and I do wonder if the Eagles are able to get up in this game if they don't just try to take the air out of the ball and run. I think if I had to play it, I'd play the under, but I can also see a path for the over as well. What do you see from a 52 total?
So, Matt, I actually kind of anticipated this question coming from you on the pod at some point. And so I went back over my last month of totals, and realized that over the last month, back to week 9, I have lost a grand total of 1 under bet. 1. And I still could not find a way to get in front of the train that is moving out toward 52 right now. Now, because of the fact that 51 is that key number, I might still eventually end up on under. I'm going to say if you like under, however, wait. It's a Sunday night game. It's an island game with 2 very public teams. You're not going to have under steam throughout the day unless something comes in early on Sunday. Unless limits go up and someone comes in hard early on it on Sunday, this isn't going down.
Steven, any thoughts on the total real quick?
Adam, can you just clarify, you got in front of the train to bet the over?
No. I'm saying I can't, all I have done for the last 3 weeks is poke and prod every high total for a way to bet under.
Yeah.
This was the one that I couldn't quite get there yet, right? Because of the way these offenses are playing and because of what we saw out of Dallas's defense last week, I just cannot get there quite yet on playing that under, although at 52, you're sure as hell not finding me on the over.
Yeah, I think it would have to be a live over for me just with what we've seen. And, the Eagles can run the ball in this game, at least on paper, and that should shorten the game a little bit. So Eagles weren't great in the red zone last week against the 49ers. Cowboys are supercharged on offense. I don't know what this Mike McCarthy appendectomy means for this game. If anything, that's another curveball that we haven't touched on. So I'm just going to kind of stay away from the over here because I have too many interests with the MVP stuff going on.
You know what it means, Steven? It means the most painful thing involving Mike McCarthy this week will not be his decision-making.
Hey-o! You got that here for free, just like every single thing we do on this channel. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button down below. Again, everything at TheLines.com is absolutely free. Also, 40,000 of you, plus over 40,000 of you have subscribed to this channel. So we are trying to get to 50,000 by the Super Bowl. If you are able to do that, we will do a massive giveaway here on this channel, and only people that are subscribed will be eligible to win that giveaway. So you should go ahead, hit that subscribe button. It is for free. Head over to TheLines.com. Upper right-hand corner is also the Discord where we are chatting everything, all the sports, all day long. So go in, get some insight over there. Hey, maybe you'll make a new friend as well somewhere along the way. For Adam, for Steven, I'm Matt. Good luck on all your bets here in Week 14.